Greetings, BookTube. Welcome back to the History Shelf. My name is Peg, as you all know. It's great to see you guys today, or tonight, I should say. Tonight's video, I am really excited to go through some of the new and noteworthy titles that have released this year from the University of Nebraska Press. Also, the Potomac Books imprint that they put out as well. I am on their media list. It's been a real honor and privilege for me to have seen some of the books that really appeal to me in the topic areas that I like to read about in history. And Nebraska Press, they put out some bangers, my friends. So I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the books that really appealed to me this year. In 2025 and see if they might interest you as well. I'm sure you could find these maybe at your library or obviously where books are sold. I think Nebraska Press is having a sale this whole month. A lot of these university presses are having big end of year sales. So this is a great time to peruse and just go through their catalogs and get those books for a steal. So I hope I can help you in that endeavor. So having said that, we're going to see if I can get this in under 50 minutes. All right, let's start with this since we are nearing Christmas, right? So this is from Potomac Books, like I said, one of the major imprints from the University of Nebraska Press. And this just sounded very interesting to me. This is The Great Christmas Boycott of 1906. Anti-Semitism and the Battle Over Christianity in the Public Schools by Scott D. Seligman. So it's a little bit, not a super dense book, but look at that beautiful portrait of these kids all around the old Christmas tree in the schoolhouse. All right, let me hold this up while I read to you a little bit about this. Today's battles over Christianity in the U.S. public schools have deep roots. In the 19th century, it was an intramural struggle between Protestants and later arriving Catholics. But at Christmas time in 1905, when Frank Harding, the Presbyterian principal of a Brooklyn elementary school, urged his Jewish students to be more like Jesus, the Jewish community entered the fray in a big way. I'm guessing they did. Whoa, talk about foot and mouth there, Frank. It was just the trigger Orthodox Jewish activist Albert Lucas had been waiting for. Fresh from battling Christian settlement houses intent on converting Jewish children, Lucas accused the public schools of illegal proselytizing and called for Harding's ouster. After the Board of Education let Harding off in 1906 with a slap on the wrist and declined to clarify the rules governing religion in schools, New York's Jews staged a boycott of school Christmas pageants in protest. The board's concession to exclude sectarian hymns and religious compositions generated enormous anti-Semitic public backlash. Jews were accused of waging war on Christmas and of being less than true Americans. The Great Christmas Boycott of 1906 traces the Christmas celebration dispute to the present day and describes how Jewish organizations of the 21st century, persuaded that politics are unlikely ever to permit a victory, seem to have reconciled themselves to the status quo and moved on to other more winnable issues. It's interesting. Yeah, the Great Christmas Boycott of 1906. Have any of you heard of that? I certainly have not. But this looks like an interesting little read. It's not too long. Looks like about 160 pages, and with some recommendations for further reading. But yeah, this kind of fits into with a lot of my other readings on anti-Semitism and things like that. So this is why that appealed to me. I'm always interested in religion and public spaces, and then just the debates over it, and it just all appeals to me. So in the furtherance of learning, I should say. Anyway, The Great Christmas Boycott of 1906 by Scott Seligman. And this actually came out in the beginning of November. So still a fairly new release. Let's focus. All right, what do we have next? I really needed to see this. This one just looks so cool. This is from Bison Books, which is another imprint of University of Nebraska Press. And it kind of goes back to my love of reading American West history, Old West, but this time with a big twist. A big twist. And it kind of it fills in a gap on some type of like studies about LGBT or the community in history. And this is Frontier Comrades. Look at that photo. Isn't that fantastic? From the Fur Trade to the Ford Car by Jim Wilk. Again, this is from Bison Books. And this came out earlier this year in the summer. Frontier Comrades examines 6 accounts of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender lives on the frontier of the American West. Each account interprets this history through experiences that take place in different parts of the West, moving chronologically from the fur trade era to the dawn of the automobile age. Jim Wilk provides the first comprehensive accounts of figures such as transgender stage driver Charlie Parkhurst. Okay. Transgender 7th Cavalry laundress Mrs. Noonan, also known as Mrs. Nash. I don't think I've heard of her. And the extraordinary Clara Dietrich and Ora Chatfield, known by the contemporary press as Lady Lovers. Frontier Comrades also offers glimpses of individual personalities, the cool and detached grandeur of William Stewart as he traversed the West during the fur trade era, the stubborn determination of Charlie Parkhurst after California's gold rush, the careful, giddy energy of Mrs. Noonan, the hidden passions of Tombstone Sheriff William Breckenridge for a Vanderbilt and a local rustler. That's fascinating. The desperate bravery of Dietrich and Chatfield as they sought to elope from Victorian Aspen, and the masculine, matter-of-fact comradeship of loggers and miners as they worked the distant Sierras. The maelstrom of opportunities and conflicts that made up the West affected lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Westerners in intrinsically personal ways. The accounts in Frontier Comrades provide an intimate yet expansive view of the American West. So yes, that is going to provide a different view than from all the Western history I grew up reading, for sure. But oh man, I just love that cover photo. Look at these two guys. They're rugged. These are guys that are just, and they're like, hey, what's up? What are you going to say about it? Yeah. Anyway, this one is out right now. It has been, but I just wanted to highlight this one too, if you're interested in either topic, American West history or LGBTQ studies, and then the merging of the two. This is a winner. Oh, and this is another one I just had to look at. This is from the University of Nebraska Press, and I've been on a Laura Ingalls Wilder kick lately, and when I saw that this was coming out, I just had to look at it. I got to read it. This is Too Good to Be Altogether Lost. Rediscovering Laura Ingalls Wilder's Little House Books by Pamela Smith Hill. This came out earlier in the summertime. It's a nice finished hardcover here. I want to do a reread of I've got so many goals and aspirations regarding reading projects, and I got to get realistic. I can't do them all, but man, I kind of want to reread and kind of revisit my youth and my childhood by rereading the Little House books. They were just such a big part of why I became a reader. I loved the series. Anyway, now I'm just like, I want to read everything about Laura Ingalls Wilder, how she wrote it, what was her life, biography, this kind of stuff. So this book says here, so Laura Ingalls Wilder wrote stories from her childhood because they were, quote, too good to be altogether lost. And those stories seemed far from being lost during the remainder of her lifetime and through most of the 20th century. They were translated into dozens of languages. Generations of children read them at school. And dedicated readers made pilgrimages to the settings of the Little House books. With the release of NBC's Little House on the Prairie series in 1974. I grew up with that series. I was 2 years old when that started, so it was always in my mind and in the background for sure. Wilder was well on her way to becoming an international literary superstar. Simultaneously, however, the novels themselves began to slip from view, replaced by an onslaught of assumptions and questions about Wilder's values and politics, and even about the book's authenticity. From the 1980s, a slow but steady critical crescendo began to erode Wilder's literary reputation. In this book, Wilder expert Pamela Smith Hill dives back into the Little House books, closely examining Wilder's text, her characters, and their stories. Hill reveals that these gritty, emotionally complex novels depict a realistic coming of age for a girl in the American West. This realism in Wilder's novels, once perceived as a fatal flaw, can lead to essential discussions not only about the past, but about the present, and the underlying racism young people encounter when reading today. Well, that's part of it too. But it was history, and that, we got to be there for all of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Hill's fresh approach to Wilder's books, including surprising revelations about Wilder's novel, The First 4 Years, shows how this author forever changed the literary landscape of children's and young adult literature in ways that remain vital and relevant today. So this book, I really feel, since she tackles each book in its own right and does like a textual analysis and historical, inventory of what was, accurate according to the, Pamela Smith Hill as an expert in Wilder studies. This would be great to read alongside the books as I'm reading them again. So I just need to stay, factor in how much time it would take for me to go through these. But in the meantime, as you can see, I'm trying to see, we've got any type of, oh, okay. Yeah. That's her first editor right here. Interesting. So I love it. I'm really looking forward to checking this out. And there's Laura Ingalls Wilder. It's an older lady. So anyone out there also just been diving into Laura Ingalls Wilder lately or wanting to? You might be really interested in this one. I know I am. And again, I just need to figure out the timeline of tackling those books. And I would read this one in conjunction with it. So Too Good to Be Altogether Lost. It's out right now from Nebraska Press. Ooh. Okay, there's so many to choose from. I gotta keep moving. I just stumble over myself. I get all excited. And I have one of them that is a novel. So it's interesting, when I get at these Nebraska Press books, they're mostly 99% of them are all straight history or academic history. But now and then they will publish an original novel, some fiction, and I'm going to show you that to you in a bit. Let's go over to the Civil War, one of my, niche areas of specialization, as it were. This book came out. Oh, I don't have the pub sheet for this one. Interesting. Came out this year, though, from Potomac Books. This is If I Can Get Home This Fall, a story of love, loss, and a cause in the Civil War by Tyler Alexander. From Potomac Books. If I Can Get Home This Fall chronicles the epic story of Dan Mason, a white man who served in the Civil War as a soldier in the 6th Vermont Infantry and as an officer in the 19th U.S. Colored Troops. It is a story of these two units from very different realities, but with a common purpose. Drawing on Mason's letters home to his fiancée, Harriet Clark, and on other historical records, Tyler Alexander provides a compelling account of the human cost of war and offers insights about the experiences and attitudes of those who witnessed war firsthand, including enlisted troops and officers, men and women, Democrats and Republicans, and white and Black Americans. Alexander examines how the most controversial issues of the war, emancipation, the draft, military strategy, the arming of Black troops, and Reconstruction policy were viewed in real time by the participants who found themselves engulfed in the maelstrom of war, particularly those from a strongly anti-slavery farming community in the hills of northeast Vermont. The voices from this distant time offer an example of what real patriotism, courage, and moral conviction look like in times of extreme national divisions over race, identity, and the meaning of democracy. So I can see where they're tying this into the present day, just with that book jacket copy. Don't have much more information beyond that, but from just kind of what I've already kind of looked into in this book, there's a lot of letter excerpts, diary excerpts, and things like this. So yeah, anything around the Civil War, I'm all about it. So this is out right now. If I can get home this fall, by Tyler Alexander. Fantastic. So we'll kind of stay in this area. We're going to look at this next book from Potomac Books, which this book came out in November. So it's still a fairly new book here. This is called Scarlet, Slavery's Enduring Legacy in an American Family, by Leslie Stainton. All right. A sixth-generation descendant of the Scarlet family of Georgia, Leslie Stainton, that's the author, grew up hearing about her heroic ancestors and their tragic plunge from wealth to poverty in the wake of the Civil War, and about the Scarlett O'Hara of novel and movie fame who made their name known. Okay. But when Stainton set out to learn the truth about her enslaving forebears, she discovered the lurid facts behind Gone with the Wind's lost cause fantasy. The centuries-long story of the real-life Scarlets is one of cruelty, greed, misogyny, the R word I think I'm not supposed to say, or I'll get flagged, kidnapping and theft, culminating in the legally sanctioned execution of an 18-year-old Black man in 1901, and in the 2020 murder of Ahmaud Arbery on a former Scarlet plantation. I did not know that. If novelist Margaret Mitchell had chosen to tell the truth about an enslaving Scarlet, this is the story she might have written. Man, wow. Oh, this is good stuff here. At its core is the riddle of Stainton's Georgia-born grandmother, Mary Mamie King Hillsman Pettigrew, who embraced the lost cause of the Confederacy, but was tormented lifelong by her suspicion that Scarlet men had engaged in racial violence in the 20th century. Mamie gave Stainton her copies of Gone with the Wind and Fanny Kemble's 1863 Journal of a Resistance on a Georgia Plantation, one of the most explosive indictments of American slavery ever written. These books informed Stainton's quest to discover the truth about her Scarlet ancestors and her grandmother's nightmare vision of racial violence involving her family. This sounds pretty potent here. By threading the stories of Margaret Mitchell and Fanny Kemble through the narrative of her Scarlet forebears, Stainton raises critical questions about the choices Americans have made then and now that have cemented the nation's complicity in slavery's persistent legacy. Okay. So this is definitely one of those history books that kind of tie in the personal. And I have enjoyed some of those type of writing in the past. I've reviewed a few books where it's not like just straight history written from like the third person perspective. This is someone kind of like, hey, I'm involved in this history. My family is, and this is what I thought or felt when I discovered these things. So I always find that really compelling. I like to juice up my history reading from time to time by getting a more personal account. So this is definitely in that category. Yeah, this sounds great. And in fact, it's so weird that, I'm talking to you now about this book because I've been looking around at different editions of, I'm very embarrassed to admit, I have never read Gone with the Wind. Okay. I have not. What can I say? It's just one of those things where I just never got around to it. And, but now I really feel like I want to, not just because of this book, but although this now kind of it's another impetus where I could like read the two books in conjunction and compare and contrast, or at least have a frame of reference, with some new insights from what this author is talking about. But yeah, I've always been really interested in, exploring the novel in a way that kind of reads it more critically. I'd like to read it in like a critical eye as opposed to entertainment value, because I've seen the movie, I know the whole thing, but I kind of want to study it. I want to study that breakdown. So anyway, Scarlet, doesn't that sound fascinating? Slavery's enduring legacy in an American family. So that is out now. Just came out in November from Potomac Books. All right, what do we got here? Oh, that's kind of crazy. So we're going to go over here. All right. This one looks really good as well. I just recently read Ghosts of Hiroshima by Charles Pellegrino, and I wrote a review of that. And here's another book on the topic of Hiroshima and survival. Excuse me. This is 90 Seconds to Midnight, a Hiroshima Survivor's Nuclear Odyssey by Charlotte DeCroze Jacobs. This came out in the summer, but I wanted to flag for you the books that I find of most interest. And Nebraska Press has a very large catalog, but obviously this jumped out at me because just World War II history in general, but I've always been a big reader on like Hiroshima and Nagasaki and stuff like this. So 90 Seconds to Midnight. Let me give you a little bit of detail around this one. I'm sorry for the glare. I have a light. I have to have it on just so I can, not be in shadow. 90 Seconds to Midnight tells the gripping and thought-provoking story of Setsuko Nakamura Thurlow, a 13-year-old girl living in Hiroshima in 1945, when the city was annihilated by an atomic bomb. Struggling with grief and anger, Thurlow set out to warn the world about the horrors of a nuclear attack in a crusade that has lasted 7 decades. In 2015, Thurlow sparked a rallying cry for activists when she proclaimed at the United Nations, quote, "Humanity and nuclear weapons cannot coexist," end quote. With that, she shifted the global discussion from nuclear deterrence to humanitarian consequences, the key in crafting the landmark Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Regarded as the conscience of the anti-nuclear movement, Thurlow accepted the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. With the fate of humanity at stake and with the resolve of her samurai ancestors, Thurlow challenged leaders of the nuclear-armed states. On January 22nd, 2021, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons went into effect, banning nuclear weapons under international law. Critical historical events need a personal narrative, and Thurlow is such a storyteller for Hiroshima. 90 Seconds to Midnight recounts Thurlow's ascent from the netherworld where she saw, heard, and smelled death, and her relentless efforts to protect the world from an unspeakable fate. Knowing she would have to live with those nightmares, Thurlow turned them into a force to impel people across the globe to learn from Hiroshima, to admit that, yes, it could happen again. Well, Lord forbid. And then to take action. Yeah, so this is definitely in my wheelhouse. And boy, I tell you, it's chilling stuff. And you never think it could happen again, but, anything can happen. So I'm really looking forward to this one as well. Another niche topic of mine. So, all right, moving on to the next one. Oh yeah, so let's go to this one. This is from Potomac Books. This book came out in June, but I wanted to highlight this one as well. This one is Victory in Shanghai, a Korean American family's journey to the CIA and the Army Special Forces by Robert S. Kim. Let's see. Victory in Shanghai tells the long-hidden story of a family from Korea that struggled for 3 decades to become Americans and ultimately fought their way to the United States through heroic actions with the U.S. Army during World War II. Among the first families from Korea to migrate to the United States in the early 20th century, the Kim family was forced into exile in Shanghai in the mid-1920s after a new U.S. immigration law in 1924 excluded Asians. 2 decades later, the family's 4 sons, raised as Americans in the expatriate community of Shanghai, voluntarily stepped forward during World War II to defend the nation they considered theirs. From both sides of the Pacific, the Kim brothers served in uniform with the U.S. Army and in the underground U.S. intelligence network in Shanghai. At the end of the war, the eldest son led the liberation of 7,000 American and Allied civilians held in Japanese internment camps in Shanghai. His actions and the support of the leading generals of the U.S. Army in China led to 3 special acts of Congress that granted him U.S. citizenship and admitted the entire Kim family into the U.S. 4 Kim brothers became some of the earliest intelligence officers of the nascent U.S. intelligence community, and 3 of them ascended to leadership positions in the CIA and the Army Special Forces. Victory in Shanghai tells 2 intertwined American origin stories. A Korean family struggled to become Americans during the World War II era, and the contributions of Korean Americans to the creation of modern U.S. intelligence and special operations. This is the history they don't teach you in school, right? I mean, this is just fascinating stuff. Like, I just love the history where they just keep uncovering new things that we just didn't even really understand. Withheld from the public until recently due to the secrecy surrounding their actions during World War II and the Cold War. So obviously reasons of, confidential information, top secret kind of stuff. The history of the Kim family is one of the great stories of coming to America and defending and strengthening it in the process. Yeah, definitely. This is definitely my type of book. And it reminds me of that book I read by Bruce Henderson, Bridge to the Sun, about all the Japanese Americans who wore the, who wore the uniform and served the U.S. and just the discrimination that they put up with. It's inspirational at the same time as being sad, like the things they had to deal with and the racism. But Victory in Shanghai, I'm curious to know more about how these Korean Americans really influenced our intelligence operations during the war and after. So thought you'd like to know about that. Let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, this is from Potomac Books, and it's about a topic I've never heard of. Let me take a quick sip here. I don't think I've ever heard about this. This came out earlier in the summer. This is Fuji Fire, Sifting Ashes of a Forgotten U.S. Marine Corps Tragedy by Chaz Henry. On October 19th, 1979, the largest, most intense tropical cyclone ever recorded propelled 5,500 gallons of gasoline into corrugated steel huts filled with U.S. Marines. I've never heard of this. The gas ignited, injuring 73 people, 13 of them fatally. The Marine Corps commandant, a veteran of combat in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, was stunned as he met scores of horribly burned survivors. Having witnessed a lot of bad things, ugly things, the general declared, none can compare to that experience. And yet, this 1979 catastrophe on the slopes of Japan's iconic Mount Fuji remains all but forgotten, except by those directly affected. True, because, I've never heard of it, and I don't wonder how many of you have heard of this. Now, the fruits of Chaz Henry's exhaustive 4-year, 2-continent investigation provide insight into what many have called the U.S. Marine Corps' worst ever peacetime disaster. Fuji Fire shares the compelling and intimate stories of heartbreak and inspiration forged by these events while bringing to light new critical analyses of the incidences, causes, and effects. Wow. Yeah, I just really appreciate these writers who just uncover these stories that have never really been covered and bring them to light. Wow. Trying to see if there's any. Wow, that is wild. Yep. Definitely something I would read in a heartbeat. So I love it. Thank you. Thank you, Nebraska Press and Potomac Books, for writing and putting out, ushering these type of books into production and, following through. And I just love learning new things that have just been hidden for whatever reason. Neglect, lack of interest, lack of an investigative writer, following the breadcrumbs and wanting to write a novel, well, not a novel, but a history of it. So Fuji Fire by Chaz Henry. Thank you. It's going to be good. All right. Let me do, these are a couple of, well, this one looks very academic, but we'll see how it is. This is a Nebraska Press release. I do have a pub sheet for this. This came out November 1st. This is a Global Approaches. I feel like I'm off center here. There we go. So I have room for the book. Global Approaches to the Holocaust, Memory, History, and Representation. Edited by Mark Selensak and Mehnaz Afridi. This came out in early November. The field of contemporary Holocaust studies is increasingly international in perspective. These approaches do not detach themselves from European history. Rather, they incorporate perspectives and voices not always considered in more traditional Holocaust studies. Okay. Let's see. Global Approaches to the Holocaust asks, what happens when scholars shift their focus from an exclusively European perspective of the Holocaust? What new insights are gained from exploring the impact of the Holocaust from outside the European milieu? How do countries that were not directly affected by Nazi policies of occupation and extermination remember the Holocaust? What does an expansive approach to the Holocaust entail? Interesting. And then it has essays about North and South Africa, Mauritius, Japan, Argentina, a slew of countries, basically. And they seek to create a critical voice in Holocaust studies that encompasses not only Europe, but also Asia, Africa, South and North America, Australia, and the Middle East. So this is a collection. Okay. And I like collected essays, and just kind of moves around. We got part 1 is covering memory. Part 2 covers history. Part 3 covers representation. So yeah, it's actually maybe it's not as academic as I thought it would be. But I geek out on this stuff, and I have done a lot of reading in Holocaust studies, and so this was another angle I wanted to kind of investigate a bit. So this is out now from Nebraska Press is the publisher of this one. So that is out now. And here's another one I'm like, what is this about? They keep putting out new histories. I'm like, never heard of this. This is fascinating. I'm doing my head voice. Where are we at? 33 minutes. Okay. Another book that came out in early November. This is The Woman Who Fought an Empire. Sarah Aronson and her Neely Spy Ring by Gregory J. Wallens. Potomac Books. Not too big of a book here. I'm sorry for the glare, everybody. Though she only lived to be 27, Sarah Aronson led a remarkable life. The Woman Who Fought an Empire tells the improbable but true odyssey of a bold young woman, the daughter of Romanian-born Jewish settlers in Palestine, who became the daring leader of a Middle East spy ring. Amid the outbreak of World War I, Aronson learned that her brother, Aaron, had formed Neely, an anti-Turkish spy ring, to aid the British in their war against the Ottomans. Aronson, who had witnessed the atrocities of the Armenian genocide by the Turks, believed that only the defeat of the Ottoman Empire could save the Palestinian Jews from a similar fate. She joined Neely, eventually rising to become the organization's leader, and she and her spies furnished vital information to British intelligence in Cairo about the Turkish military forces until she was caught, oh no, and tortured by the Turks in the fall of 1917. The Woman Who Fought an Empire, set at the birth of the modern Middle East, is an espionage thriller that rebukes the Hollywood stereotype of women spies as femme fatales. Oh, that's great. Yes. I, again, had no idea, knew nothing about this. So something I would definitely read in a heartbeat. And kind of following along that string with some more take on like women in history, we've got another title here from Potomac Books called An Unladylike Profession, American Women War Correspondents in World War I, right? And this is by Chris Dubbs. Chris Dubbs. So, look at that. I just love this cover. An Unladylike Profession. And a foreword by Judy Woodruff. Okay, I don't have a pub sheet, so let me just read this to you. When World War I began, war reporting was a thoroughly masculine bastion of journalism. But that did not stop dozens of women reporters from stepping into the breach, defying gender norms and official restrictions to establish roles for themselves and to write new kinds of narratives about women and war. Chris Dubbs tells the fascinating stories of, oh, look at this! I'm always learning. Edith Wharton, wow, Nellie Bly, and more than 30 other American women who worked as war reporters. As Dubbs shows, stories by these journalists brought in women from the periphery of war and made them active participants, fully engaged and equally heroic, if bearing different burdens and making different sacrifices. Women journalists traveled from belligerent capitals to the front lines to report on the conflict, but their experiences also brought them into contact with social transformations, political unrest, labor conditions, campaigns for women's rights, and the rise of revolutionary socialism. An eye-opening look at women's war reporting, An Unladylike Profession, is a portrait of a sisterhood from the guns of August to the corridors of Versailles. Oh my gosh, I had no idea that Edith Wharton was a war reporter. Should I have known that? I don't know. I'm more of a history person than I am like, reading a lot of like literature and classics and stuff, but which I do, but not as much as history. So this is going to be great. An Unladylike Profession. You get it, girl. I love it. Let's do this. Speaking of that unladylike profession, Dickie Chappelle, I recently bought I haven't shown it yet, I don't think, book haul from Book Outlet, and I got a biography on Dickie Chappelle, who was a woman, she was a photographer during, was it Vietnam? And I heard about that from a historical fiction novel that was in my book club. And I was like, I haven't heard of this woman. And she sounds like she was just so focused. She's like, I got to get there first. I got to get the photos. I got to get it first. And she was very ambitious, Dickie Chappelle. So this is kind of following along those lines. So this is some good stuff. It's kind of a theme that I've been stumbling across lately. It's just women branching out into these previously male-dominated, vocations. So, yes, this is going to be great. An Unladylike Profession by Chris Dubbs. Check this one out, you guys. All right, we got 3 books left. 38 minutes. We're doing all right. Okay, so this one might be a little. This could be a little controversial. Is this from the same? Yes, one of the imprints of University of Nebraska Press is the Jewish Publication Society. I have several of their books, actually, and they put out some really good histories. Now, this one covers a very controversial topic right now, that's for sure. This is The Road to October 7th, Hamas, the Holocaust, and the Internal War Against the Jews by Raphael Madoff. So we kind of know what angle they're taking on this, and it is from the Jewish Publication Society, but that's okay. You can read both sides of things and make up your own mind. The Road to October 7th examines what paved the way for the attack on Israel and its aftermath. which happened in 2023. Part 1, the present, documents the Hamas invasion, the rise of Hamas, the education of Palestinian Arab children to hate and kill, the diplomatic decisions that helped enable the attack, and the propagation of anti-Israel and anti-Jewish libels. Part 2, the past, analyzes how in both method and ideology the Hamas assault echoed the pogroms in medieval Europe, Tsarist Russia, and Ukraine, the Holocaust, and a century of Palestinian Arab terrorism. It also examines a select American university's cultivation of friendly relations with Nazi Germany in the 1930s, the same universities that tolerated pro-Hamas protests after October 7th. And October 7th is a turning point in the long history of anti-Semitism. Readers will emerge with important insights on the Hamas attack, anti-Semitic education in Palestinian Arab society, pro-Hamas groups on U.S. campuses, the responses of women's and human rights organizations to mass sexual violence, misconceptions and fabrications about Israel's conduct in the ensuing war, and why October 7th needs to be viewed as one segment of both the century-long Palestinian Arab War and the centuries-old international war against the Jewish people. So this definitely is taking the Jewish perspective as far as I'm not going to say for everybody, because not a lot of Jewish people, are supporting the war either. Look, I don't want to get into some dangerous ground here on this, but I'm always curious to read both sides. I've got some other books I'm going to be showing you, talking about the war as as war crimes and genocide and stuff like this from the other side. So this is just another book to kind of balance things out a bit. You don't want to read all one thing. You gotta take in the different arguments and just see where you fall. Anyway, so this is one of their recent releases from Nebraska Press from the Jewish Publication Society. And then we definitely have an academic book here. Wow. It's got a beautiful, an interesting naked dust jacket here. This book came out November 1st. This is Parishioners of Sovereignty, A History of Nationhood and War in 19th Century Paraguay by Michael Kenneth Huner. Fantastic. Look at this book. And this is a Nebraska Press title. The story of 19th century Paraguay is the story of the dawn of modern nationhood in the world. And a devastating war is the culmination of this tale. The War of the Triple Alliance, which was from 1864 to 1870, considered the bloodiest interstate conflict in the history of the Americas, pitted Paraguay against the combined forces of Imperial Brazil and the republics of Argentina and Uruguay. By the end of the war, Paraguay was defeated and occupied, losing more than half its total population. Why then did everyday people in 19th century Paraguay join and endure the violence and trauma associated with post-colonial sovereignty? In this book, Michael Kenneth Huner answers this question. He explores how modern nationhood became a living, breathing reality among everyday people in Paraguay, even as such bonds of sovereignty remain fluid and contingent in the years leading up to and during the war. Although conventional history still portrays Paraguay's experience in the conflict as the result of a precocious cultural and ethno-linguistic-based nationalism, Huner argues in contrast that religion and republicanism rendered modern nationhood a moral imperative for which everyday Paraguayans worked, died, killed, and subverted. By tracing the complex interplay of religion, republicanism, and local social history that created the Paraguayan nation and state, and utilizing unique sources in the Guarani language, Parishioners of Sovereignty casts crucial new light on the social history of early nation building throughout the Americas. Fascinating. And Michael Kenneth Huner is a professor an associate professor of history at Grand Valley State University. Don't know a lot about this one as well, and especially this little-known war. What was this called again? The War of the Triple Alliance. So that might be able to fill in some gaps in my knowledge, especially when it comes to like South American history. but definitely, I think, it's probably even be considered a, ancillary or extra credit reading in one of Michael Kenneth Uner's classes. So definitely something maybe more textbook-like, but still very interesting. There's not a lot of history that does not interest me. People say, well, what's your favorite area? I'm like, well, Civil War is where I started. Russian history is where I still am really, embedded deep within it, reading and just fascinated. But there's no time period really that I say no to. That was not always the case. I remember for a long time, I was just like, no, Civil War is pretty much that or this or Old West history. But now it's just like, I think my palette, expanded probably about 20 years ago. I hit my 30s and I was like, I want to read everything about history. Just want to know it all. All right, final book, you guys. This is more racy, juicy. I don't know what you call it. This came out earlier this month, actually. So this was just published December 1st. And this is from Potomac Books. And this is, look at this. Charlie and Me. Oh boy. Charles Manson and the reporter who came to know the most famous mass murderer in history. This is by Mary Nicewinder with Kate Nicewinder. All right, so they must be related. It's not too big of a book. I'm trying to get the glare off. Here we go. Charles Manson, arguably the most famous killer in American history, remains a source of fascination more than 50 years after the Tate LaBianca murders that shocked the nation. In previous books about the 1969 murders, writers focused on trial testimony and scrambled to find anything new that would provide insight into what happened. The information they had was orchestrated by the prosecution, which used cult images and sex orgies to shock. But who was Manson really? Was he the racist, helter-skelter, mind-controlling cult master portrayed in the media? Or was there more? Only one journalist, Mary Nicewinder, was able to meet Manson in person during the year-long trial in 1970. After Manson's arrest, Nicewinder spent more time with Manson than any other person, except maybe his prison guards. Manson and Nicewinder spoke in person at the county jail or on the phone almost daily. However, the conversations between Manson and Nicewinder have never been published. Most of their talks were off the record, and Nicewinder refused to write about them until after Manson's death in prison in 2017. In Charlie and Me, Nicewinder finally reveals their conversations and the insights she gained from her time with Manson, a complicated man, a killer, and a figure of intense interest in American crime culture. Wow. I included this book in my kind of like my new and noteworthy, and it's like my Nebraska Press Spotlight. But I plan on doing another video where I'm going over some of the true crime books that have really engaged my interest over the past couple of years and are fairly new. This one I probably could have also included in this video, and I still might for anyone who's coming to the video for the first time. The fact that it's like conversations that she kept under wraps until he died. So now it's going to be revealed. And so I'm curious to see, what did she learn? There's a lot of graphic stuff in here. Not graphic, like I'm just talking about like illustrations and drawings, transcripts, photos. So yeah, this should be a quick read, but I'm interested, and I might include that in my true crime spotlight video, which I hope to be making this month. So, all right, guys. So here we are, 48 minutes. I hope you enjoyed this look at the new and noteworthy titles that have come out in 2025 from Nebraska Press and their imprints that have interested me. Again, they publish a lot more than that, but these are the titles that jumped out at me that I am interested in. And so I wanted to share them with you. Let me know what you think. Anything here that, is, making you want to rush out and take a look, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, all right, moving on, guys. I've got more videos coming. I've got so many videos coming. So Love to hear from you as always. Thanks for joining me here for another episode of the History Shelf, and we'll see you on the flip side. Bye.